Everything you think you know about Theseus is a lie. Forget the sanitized tales of heroic victory. This is a story of brutal power, monstrous desire, and a labyrinth built on secrets. The Minotaur wasn't just a beast. He was a product of divine wrath and unspeakable acts, and Theseus, far from a shining knight, walked a path paved with blood and ambition. The air hung thick and heavy, saturated with the cloying sweetness of olive oil and the metallic tang of sacrifice. Knossos, a sprawling city of sun-baked brick and vibrant frescoes, pulsed with a nervous energy. The Athenian ship, black-sailed and ominous, had arrived, its arrival a yearly grim reminder of Crete's dominance. 7 young men and 7 young women, the tribute demanded by King Minos, shuffled down the gangplank, their faces masks of fear and resignation. They were offerings to a monster, fuel for a nightmare. King Minos, a figure carved from granite and draped in crimson robes, watched them with cold calculation. He was a man who believed himself to be more than mortal, a demigod entitled to obedience and adoration. His reign was built on fear, his power cemented by the labyrinth and the beast it contained. The tribute was not just a demonstration of power, but a constant reassurance of his own invincibility. He needed to be feared. The queen, Pasiphae, remained hidden in the palace, a ghost haunted by her own desires. Once celebrated for her beauty and lineage, daughter of Helios, the sun god, she was now a prisoner of her own making, consumed by a lust so profound it warped her very being. The white bull, a creature of impossible beauty sent by Poseidon, was the object of her obsession, a symbol of Minos's hubris and her own damnation. Every sunrise was a torture. Daedalus, the master craftsman, the architect of the labyrinth itself, watched the proceedings from the shadows, his face etched with worry. He was a genius, yes, but also a pawn, trapped in Minos's court by fear and obligation. He knew the dark secrets of the palace, the monstrous truth hidden within the labyrinth's heart. He knew the queen's terrible secret. His guilt was a constant companion, a weight that bowed his shoulders and haunted his dreams. Pasiphae's madness had driven her to desperate measures. She had pleaded with Daedalus, the man who could build anything, to create a vessel for her unholy desire. The wooden cow, a grotesque parody of nature, was his masterpiece, a testament to his skill and his shame. Inside, hidden from the world, Pasiphae had consummated her unnatural lust, the consequences of which now roamed the labyrinth's depths. The Minotaur, a creature of nightmares, half man, half bull, a living embodiment of Minos' sins and Pasiphae's despair. It was a being of pure instinct, driven by hunger and rage, forever trapped within the labyrinth's twisting corridors. The tribute was its sustenance, a gruesome ritual that perpetuated the cycle of violence and fear. Each scream in the labyrinth was a testament to the king's power. Theseus, the son of King Aegeus of Athens, was among the chosen tribute, though he certainly did not appear to be suffering in the same manner as the others. He volunteered, a rash act of bravery or perhaps foolishness. He carried with him not just a sword, but a burning desire to end the tyranny of Minos and slay the beast that haunted Athenian dreams. He was confident in his skills. Ariadne, Minos' daughter, watched Theseus from afar, her heart stirring with a mixture of pity and intrigue. She saw in him a spark of defiance, a glimmer of hope in the darkness that had consumed her family. She was trapped in a gilded cage, surrounded by luxury but starved for freedom. The princess was trapped. She knew the labyrinth's secrets, the paths that led to the Minotaur and the ways to escape its deadly embrace. She also knew the price of defying her father, the consequences of betraying the king. But she also knew she could not stand by and watch more innocent lives be sacrificed. The decision was eating her alive. Driven by love or perhaps a desire for change, she sought out Theseus, offering him a thread, a lifeline to guide him through the labyrinth's treacherous depths. The thread, spun from the finest wool and imbued with magic, would lead him to the Minotaur and, more importantly, back to freedom. This simple act of defiance would change everything. Theseus accepted the thread, his eyes meeting Ariadne's with a silent understanding. He knew the risks, the dangers that lay ahead, but he also knew that he could not turn back, not with the fate of Athens and the lives of his companions resting on his shoulders. He was ready for the challenge. He entered the labyrinth, the darkness closing in around him like a suffocating blanket. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the echoes of screams. The walls twisted and turned, disorienting and confusing. But he held tight to the thread, trusting in Ariadne's guidance and his own strength. Deep within the labyrinth's heart he found the Minotaur, a hulking mass of muscle and rage. The beast charged, its eyes burning with primal fury. Theseus stood his ground, his sword raised, ready to face the monster that had haunted his dreams. The battle was brutal, a dance of death in the labyrinth's dark embrace. Theseus, fueled by adrenaline and a thirst for justice, fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed. He dodged the Minotaur's savage attacks, his sword finding its mark again and again. Finally, with a desperate lunge, he plunged his sword deep into the beast's heart, silencing its roar forever. The Minotaur fell, its massive body collapsing to the ground. He followed Ariadne's thread back to the entrance, emerging from the labyrinth victorious but forever changed. He had slain the monster, but he knew that the true monsters often wore human faces. The Athenians were released, but they would never forget their experiences inside the labyrinth. He sailed away from Crete with Ariadne, promising her a life of freedom and happiness. But fate, as always, had other plans. On the island of Knossos he abandoned her, leaving her to a lonely fate. Was it intentional betrayal, or a manipulation of the gods? He returned to Athens, forgetting to change the black sails of his ship. His father, King Aegeus, saw the black sails from afar and, believing his son to be dead, threw himself into the sea, giving the Aegean Sea its name. Theseus, the hero, had inadvertently caused his father's death. He became king of Athens, but his reign was marked by tragedy and betrayal. The man who slayed the Minotaur became a king mired in the same darkness he sought to destroy. He was no better than Minos. Everything he knew was about to shatter. The unnatural craving and insane desire drove Pasiphae to couple with a magical bull. The consequences of this act were horrifying. In time, Pasiphae gave birth to a creature that shocked and horrified the entire palace and all the inhabitants of Crete. The infant was a true monster. The upper part of its body was human. Crowning its head was a massive bull's head, with moist, sharp horns and eyes full of rage and animal cruelty. The sounds the creature made frightened all who heard them. Soon the creature was named Asterius, but it became more widely known as the Minotaur, which literally meant Minos' bull. The name was a constant reminder to the king of his sins before the gods and his wife's unnatural act. Seeing this monster, Minos understood that it was the gods' punishment for his pride and deceit. The king was deeply shaken and overcome with fear and shame. He knew he couldn't kill the creature, because that would only increase the wrath of the gods. But he couldn't show it to the people either, otherwise the whole island would turn away from the king and his power. Minos summoned Daedalus again and ordered him to create a special structure from which the Minotaur could never escape, and no one could enter to learn the terrible secret of family. This structure was to be a labyrinth, a huge building with many corridors and dead ends, so intricate and treacherous that even its creator could barely find his way out. Daedalus, true to his art, once again brilliantly accomplished the task. He built a huge labyrinth near the palace of Knossos. The exits of this labyrinth intertwined, looped, and repeated themselves so that a person who entered could no longer find their way back. Anyone who entered the labyrinth remained forever in its dark corridors. It was into this labyrinth that King Minos dragged the terrible Minotaur, thus hiding the monster and his family from the whole world. At that moment, the fates of the king, Pasiphae and Daedalus were forever intertwined labyrinth. Daedalus and his son Icarus later attempted to escape from Minos' wrath, leaving the island with the help of wings created by the master. That was another story, tragic and full of symbolism, but closely linked to consequences of the terrible sin to which the great inventor was an accomplice. While on Crete, King Minos concealed the shameful monster in the Labyrinth. Tragic events unfolded beyond the island, closely linked to his destiny. Once, Androgeus, King Minos' beloved son, went to Athens to participate in athletic competitions and prove his superiority and courage to all the Greeks. The young prince was incredibly talented and strong, so he easily won all the competitions. His success aroused the envy and irritation of the Athenians, and soon Androgeus died under strange and tragic circumstances. Some said that he was treacherously killed by the locals out of envy and malice, while others said that the king of Athens, Aegeus, deliberately sent him on a dangerous hunt where the prince was killed by a wild bull. Learning of his son's death, Minos went into a furious rage. Minos, the first of the Greek kings to create a naval power, besieged Athens from the sea and land. Gathering a powerful Cretan fleet and a huge army, he began a bloody war against the Athenians, accusing them of the treacherous murder of his heir. Athens resisted for a long time, but the Cretan army proved stronger, and soon the city was on the verge of complete defeat. The Athenians were forced to sue for peace on any terms that the angry Minos would set. The king, tormented by grief and thirst for revenge, devised a cruel and humiliating condition for the truce. Every 9 years, Athens had to send a terrible tribute to Crete in the form of 7 young women, chosen by lot from noble families. These unfortunates were doomed to become live food for the hungry and enraged Minotaur, a monster that lived in the darkness of the labyrinth and awaited new victims. This bloody tribute had already been paid twice, and Athens was preparing for the 3rd shipment, seeing no hope of deliverance. The city was in despair. Each shipment of tribute turned into a national tragedy that deprived people of peace and hope for many years. As the fateful day of selection approached, the whole city froze in horror and tension. No one could escape fate if they drew that terrible ticket. On the day of the tribute shipment, Athens was engulfed in mourning and despair. Mothers wailed in the streets, fathers silently lowered their heads, and the chosen victims said goodbye to their loved ones for the last time, knowing that their lives would soon end the Cretan labyrinth. The procession of young people, adorned with wreaths that looked more like funeral wreaths, moved towards the Athenian port. None of them hoped to return home. It was in this terrible time, when it seemed that Athens was forever doomed to this bloody tribute, that a man appeared in the city's destiny, ready to change the course of history. This man was a young hero named Theseus. Many years ago, King Aegeus visited the Delphic oracle to find out why he had no children and how to obtain an heir. The oracle's answer was vague and mysterious, and Aegeus went to Troezen to the wise King Theseus to help him understand the prophecy. Theseus, understanding the hidden meaning of the prediction, decided to bring Aegeus together with his daughter, the beautiful Princess Aethra, hoping in this way to become related to the Athenian royal house and ensure worthy offspring. At dawn, Aegeus left Aethra, but before leaving, he hid his sandals and sword under a huge stone. He told Aethra that if she had a son, and he became strong enough to lift that stone, let him go to Athens with the sword and sandals. By these things, Aegeus would recognize him and acknowledge him as his heir. This son, Theseus, strong and brave, now approached King Aegeus with a plan to end the terrible tribute. He volunteered to be one of the 7 young men to be sent to Crete, not as a sacrifice, but as a warrior determined to slay the Minotaur. Aegeus, though filled with dread at the thought of losing his son, recognized the courage and determination in Theseus's eyes, and reluctantly agreed. He gave Theseus a ship with white sails, instructing him that if he was successful in slaying the Minotaur, he should replace the black sails with white ones on his return journey, signalling his victory and safe return. The plan was set. Hope flickered once more in the hearts of the Athenians, and Theseus prepared for his perilous journey. But that was only the beginning. That same night, while Aegeus lay with Aethra, Poseidon himself also visited her. Therefore Theseus was considered the son of 2 fathers, the king of Athens and the lord of the seas. This dual heritage made Theseus special among all the heroes of Greece. Growing up, Theseus was strong, brave, and incredibly persistent. His childhood consisted of constant training, quickly becoming an unmatched and skilled warrior. The day came when Aethra revealed the secret of his birth. The young hero effortlessly lifted the massive stone. He retrieved his father's sword and sandals, embarking on a journey to meet his father and claim his rightful place in Athens. The road from Troezen to Athens was perilous, infested with bandits who terrorized travellers. It was on this very road that Theseus accomplished his first feats, which would make his name famous throughout all of Greece. First, he encountered the robber Pasiphae, who attacked people with a huge bronze club. Theseus defeated him and took the club as a symbol of his first victory. Next, the cruel robber Sinis appeared in the hero's path. He tortured travellers by tying them to the tops of pine trees, bending the trees to the ground and releasing them, tearing the victims apart. Theseus overcame him in battle and executed him in the same terrible way that the robber had dealt with innocent victims. Later, he killed the Crommyonian sow, a huge, ferocious beast that terrorized the surrounding area. Then he faced Scyron, a robber who forced passing travellers to wash his feet at the edge of a high cliff. Afterward, he kicked them down, where a giant sea turtle devoured them. Theseus not only defeated him in a fight, but threw him off the cliff himself, atoning for all the people Scyron had killed. Another villain who fell by Theseus's hand was Cercyon, a robber who challenged travellers to wrestle and brutally killed them in unfair combat. Theseus defeated him, demonstrating his superior strength and skill. Last in the chain of the hero's exploits was the infamous robber Procrustes. He lured strangers into his house and laid them on a special bed. If a person was too long, Procrustes would cut off their legs. If they were too short, he would stretch their body to the required length, causing terrible suffering. Theseus dealt with Procrustes in the same way that he treated others. He placed the robber on his own terrible bed and executed him the same way. Thus, by performing these feats, Theseus cleared the road to Athens of bandits and became a hero long before arriving in the city. When he finally arrived in Athens, King Aegeus didn't recognize him immediately. At this time, the cunning sorceress Medea, daughter of King Colchis and former wife of the hero Jason, who had fled to Athens after her cruel crimes committed out of love and revenge, lived with Aegeus. Medea immediately understood who the young stranger was, and saw Theseus as a dangerous rival to her son, born to Aegeus. The sorceress convinced the king that the youth was an enemy who had come to destroy him, and prepared a cup of poison for Theseus. But as Theseus sat at the royal table and prepared to drink, Aegeus saw the sword that he had once hidden under the stone and recognized his son. He instantly knocked the cup of poison from the youth's hand, saving him from death. Thus, Theseus escaped a terrible death, and the treacherous Medea was forced to flee Athens with her son. Father and son were united in a happy embrace, but the joy of the meeting was overshadowed by a sad event. The time for sending another bloody tribute to Crete was approaching. Theseus watched the sorrowful sight. 7 young women had already been the noble families of Athens and were preparing to go to their deaths in the monster's lair. The young hero's heart was filled with grief and indignation. At that moment, he made the most important decision of his life. He volunteered to go to Crete with the doomed, enter the Labyrinth, and fight the terrible Minotaur to forever rid Athens of the cursed tribute. King Aegeus fearfully tried to dissuade his son, but Theseus was adamant. Seeing the young hero's determination, Aegeus asked him for only one thing. If he managed to defeat the monster and remained alive, then on his return, black sail on the ship with a white one. That way, the old king would know in advance whether his son was alive or had died in the bloody depths of the labyrinth.